Today I'm going to be sharing with you about 14 beautiful flowering plants that you can use in your shade garden. My name is Amy, and over at Pretty Purple Door I help home gardeners design landscapes that are uniquely you. Now I'm going to remove my face from the screen so I don't block any of these beautiful plants, and let's get right into it. This is Little Rocket Leopard plant. The Little Rocket Leopard plant is a striking perennial that thrives in part shade. It features these large heart-shaped leaves and really tall dark purple spires, and they're adorned with these vibrant yellow flowers that almost look like a bottle rocket or fireworks. It's a really compact plant at 3 to 4 feet high and wide. It's deer resistant and very cold hardy to zone 4. It's a great choice for water gardens, for large containers, rain gardens. It has this really dramatic appearance, and it's also really pollinator friendly, so it makes it a standout in any shady perennial border or woodland garden. This is Vision in Pink Astilbe, and it's a charming perennial plant with very soft pink plumes that bloom in mid to late summer. I really like this one because it is a very showy flowery plant for shade, so it can really brighten up an area. It has this deep green foliage that provides a lovely contrast to the delicate flowers, and there's different varieties of Astilbe that have different flower colors. There's a white one, so you can definitely look into Astilbes in general for shade. It thrives in rich, well-drained soil, and it prefers part shade to full shade, though it can tolerate some morning sun or full sun in cooler areas. This plant is also deer and rabbit resistant to an extent, and it attracts butterflies and hummingbirds. It requires regular watering to keep the soil moist, and it benefits from a thick layer of mulch to conserve that moisture so you don't have to water as often. So this is another great choice for shade garden. This is called Bleeding Heart Luxuriant, and it's a really pretty perennial with pink heart-shaped flowers that sort of dangle off of the foliage, and the foliage is a fern-like texture. It's really, really cool. This thrives in part shade in moist, well-drained soil. It also attracts pollinators, butterflies, and birds, and it's a delightful touch for late spring to early summer in your shade garden. Virginia bluebells are native wildflowers that colonize in the moist woodlands of eastern North America. Bluebells have smooth gray-green foliage with clusters of pink buds that open into these light blue trumpet-shaped flowers that you see on the screen here. Virginia bluebells are really great for early spring interest in the garden, and they're frequently visited by pollinators, especially because they're native in the eastern North America region. The blooms will last for many weeks in early spring. Usually in my location in Northeast Pennsylvania, it's from April to May, and they'll typically go dormant by midsummer. Sky Blue Aster is a charming fall perennial featuring these sweet blue daisy-shaped flowers, so this is a great option for later season interest in the shade garden. With its airy texture, it complements shorter ground covers and even taller perennials or small shrubs in your garden. Aster can tolerate quite a bit of shade. It says full sun in most descriptions I've read, but I have them in a partial shade area that gets about 4 or 5 hours of sun per day, and it does really well. It likes well-drained soil. It reaches a height to about 2 to 3 feet, and it spreads to 18 to 24 inches wide. It blooms from late August to October, and it's a North American native wildflower, which is an absolute butterfly magnet, which adds beauty and also that wildlife interest to the later growing season. Here we have Wedding Party Dark and Handsome Lenten Rose, also known as hellebore. So this is just one variety of hellebore, and all hellebores will do really well in a shade garden. But this one in particular I chose because it's just so dramatic, and it's got these large double flowers in shades of purple black to black. It has a really compact stature, and it can tolerate moist or even dry shade, which is really a tough condition to handle. They're also great in patio containers. It's actually almost like a winter blooming variety because it blooms so early in the season. And it continues to flower for 8 weeks. Some say it flowers even longer than that. So it adds a lot of beauty and interest in those early months before any of the spring perennials or bulbs are even up. It's a pretty fast grower, and like I said, these come in all different colors. There's lime greens, there's pinks, there's whites and ivories, so definitely look into hellebores for that early season interest. And while lists of beautiful plants are a great inspiration, and I love sharing all of these with you, there's so much more involved in designing beautiful garden beds. So make sure you check out this free training I have. It's called 3 Garden Design Secrets. It's about an hour long and it's totally free. I share the top 3 biggest mistakes I see home gardeners make and how to actually get your dream garden. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description below. And it's a great transition from just looking at plant lists to actually learning exactly what will help you succeed in your garden once you have this big list of plants. Next up is Summer Sweet Ruby Spice. This is also called Clethra, and it blooms in late July and into August, and it has these very vivid pink flower spikes on current season growth. So you don't want to prune this one in the same season because you're going to cut off all of the blooms. This is a really lovely variety. It blooms longer than any other of the Clethra or Summer Sweet species. This is a native plant and it prefers full sun to part shade in moist to wet soil, but it will also tolerate clay soil, so that's a great option if you're stuck with a lot of clay that doesn't drain very well. It grows best in light dappled shade or with some morning sun and then afternoon shade, and it spreads by suckering roots that form wide colonies. So make sure that you have the space for this one to spread out and do its thing. It's not aggressively spreading or anything, but it does kind of sucker and create roots and more will pop up. So if you have an open area that you need to fill, this might be a great option for you. Roseanne geranium is a perennial plant with a spreading growth habit, so that means that it's a little bit wider than it is high. This plant is super versatile and it thrives in a wide range of conditions from zones 4 through 10, so very cold and hot tolerant. It features these vibrant violet blue flowers. I'd say they're more on the violet side than the blue, and they have these little white centers in them. They bloom in the summer and they'll also rebloom for you into the fall. It has a compact size and this long blooming period makes it really great for mass plantings or even as a ground cover underneath all of your other plants. And it's also known for attracting butterflies. It's also pretty tolerant of heat and humidity. So this is just great for all different conditions, anywhere from full sun to quite a bit of shade, and I'd highly recommend it. Running tapestry foam flower, also known as tiarella, is a shade-loving perennial ground cover that thrives in zones 4 through 8. It's low-growing and has really dense green foliage, which is accented by these creamy white spring flowers. And it makes it a really good addition for a shade garden because anytime you can get those brighter or lighter shades of flowers in a shade garden, it's really going to pop. This is also resistant to deer and rabbits. In general, whenever I say that things are resistant to deer and rabbits, it doesn't mean that they're never going to get nibbled on or eaten by deer or rabbits. It just means that in general, they don't like this plant as much as other plants. So take that with a grain of salt. This plant's really easy to care for. It can be used to create naturalistic plantings in woodland gardens. It's great for a ground cover. It's also got really attractive foliage. So even after it blooms in early spring, it's still going to look nice and add visual interest to your garden. It also attracts pollinators, so that's another bonus. This is dwarf Fothergilla, and it's a native North American ornamental shrub. It's known for its compact growth and its beautiful, beautiful fall color. I love it because it has spring, summer, and fall interest, so it's got 3 seasons of interest. So it's really one of those plants that earns its place in my landscape, and it should in yours too. It flowers in the spring with these creamy white flowers that are shaped like tiny bottle brushes. It's also got blue-green foliage that takes center stage in the summertime, and in the fall, the foliage turns red and orange. So it's just absolutely beautiful, and every season it's really bringing something different to your garden. The white blooms are long-lasting and they provide a really important nectar source for butterflies and essential pollinators. And they also almost kind of smell like honey, so it's a beautifully scented plant too. It's pest resistant, it's cold and heat tolerant, and it can thrive in full sun or partial shade. It prefers acidic, well-draining soil with consistent moisture, and you can add some mulch around this plant to hold in that water so it gets the consistent moisture and it doesn't dry out in between waterings. This is Twinkle Toes Lungwort, and it's a really cute perennial with a lovely periwinkle blue flower, and that ages to violets and pinks in mid to late spring. Its unique dark green leaves are speckled with silver. This is really a showstopper in the garden. Even when it's not blooming, it has that beautiful speckled foliage. It thrives in full shade to part shade. It's very pollinator friendly. It attracts bees and hummingbirds. It's low maintenance. It's deer resistant, unlike hostas who have a similar foliage. So if you're looking for a deer resistant plant and you can't do hosta, check out Lungwort. You can put it in containers. It's great for edging a woodland garden, and it's also great for pathways in the shade. Next up is Jack Frost Brunnera, and this is one of my absolute favorite plants. It features this frosty silver-leafed foliage. It resembles almost like a cracked porcelain, and it provides just a brilliant backdrop to the bright baby blue flowers in early spring. This is one of the longest blooming perennials in my garden, which I think is really interesting. I'll share a link to the video that I have about all of the long blooming perennials in my garden, but this is one of them. And it is a true blue flower instead of more of a violet. This really does read true periwinkle blue. It's got a compact growth. It's only like 12 to 18 high by 18 to 24 wide, and it makes it really easy to tuck in between plants where you have some space. It's also deer resistant, which again, it's like similar to hosta, but the deer kind of stay away from this one. And it's very pollinator friendly and requires minimal care. If you do like hostas, I highly recommend checking out the Brunnera and also the lungwort that I just mentioned. Bugleweed, or ajuga, this one is the variety Black Scallop, but all of the ajugas are really great options for shade gardens, actually from full sun to shade, so it's very versatile. It's a perennial plant, and it has dark purple, almost black foliage. It's like really, really close to black, but it has that little tinge of red into it. It forms a really thick mat, about 4 inches, so it's a great ground cover. It's great for choking out weeds and preventing weed growth. It produces these tiny spikes of these deep lavender flowers in spring. They almost shoot up above all of the dark foliage, so it really contrasts and stands out really well. And it's ideal to use between stepping stones or as a ground cover in garden beds. While I wouldn't recommend it necessarily for a path that you're going to be walking on often, it is okay to step on it. It seems to just come right back. It's also deer and rabbit resistant and pretty low maintenance. It does spread like any ground cover, and just make sure that you do your research before planting this to make sure that it's going to be okay in your location and it's not going to get too aggressive on you. This is a sweet woodruff. It does well in part shade to full shade. It's another ground cover. It's got almost an olive green foliage with these cute little white star-like flowers on top of it. And like I said before, anytime that you can add white blooms to a shady area, you have a winning plant on your hands. The softness of the tiny white flowers under the shade of a pine is really elegant, really charming. I could see this doing really well as a ground cover in a traditional garden or any woodland garden, really. It's just a beautiful ground cover, and in my experience, this ground cover stays really well controlled when it's in a shady area. Some people say that when it gets more sun, it can get a little aggressive or hard to control, so keep that in mind. It also has beautiful foliage that stands out in the shade. It's not dark where it's going to blend in with the mulch or the soil. You're going to really be able to see and enjoy all of the lush green foliage. So these are a few other shrubs that I would recommend for a shade garden: hydrangea, azalea, and rhododendron. They're all staple shrubs that you'll see in many shady landscapes. And you can check out these and many other fantastic and unique shrubs for shade in this video that I'm going to put on the screen right here. And I'll see you over in that one to look at some flowering shrubs for shade.